Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions, they just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
Welcome to Birds and Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson. I'm so excited to have you guys here today. Welcome back to the Hive, y'all. And if this is your first episode, welcome to the Hive. We're really excited to have you here at Birds and Bees podcast. Today we're talking about queer spirituality. And the unique part of this is we're talking about what it is like to be an individual that is in society that is having a hard time including everybody. We go over all of life having value. We're talking about how we find our place of purpose, the story that sometimes we tell ourselves, like, oh, I really hope my child or my grandchild does this and this and this, and how that can shift the way that we can support them later. And if you find yourself in this situation, how you can start making your mind shift now to support those. If you don't agree with someone, how you can still show love, connection, and be there for them in love, even if you don't necessarily agree with what actions they're taking or what they're doing, or if you yourself are in the process of trying to figure things out, but want to show love and connection to your child or your partner or someone that you really care about. So today I've brought on Jerry Buie. I'm so excited to get this episode to you. If you find parts of this supportive, please consider sending this to your friends and family members. Give us a rate and review on iTunes. That helps out the podcast a lot, as well as it helps us get to more and more listeners who really need this information. We're all a part of a hive. We're all working together to get to the place that we want to be. I'm excited to have you here today. We're going to get to the interview right now. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me a text or give me a call, 385-449-1818. Leave a message. It goes straight to voicemail, so you don't have to worry about actually talking to me. But you can also reach out and talk to us on our Facebook page, Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. Without further ado, let's get to the recording. This is Queer Spirituality with Jerry Buie. Thanks for tuning in. All right, welcome to Birds and Bees podcast. Jerry, so excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
So today, me and Jerry, we're going to be talking about queer sexuality and spirituality. And I know as we were talking about this, I've been even separating them in the conversations, like, oh, how are we going to talk about sexuality and spirituality? And you wrote to me the other day saying, hey, these are one. And I'd love for us to get into that, but I'm also curious about what got you into the practice that you were in, because you're an LCSW. And I want to kind of explore some of that and get more into seeing how we can merge these two back to where they should be.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how you got into being a social worker as well as the spirituality that you're in.
Well, it's a long story. I think I've always known that I want to be involved in the helping professions. Mm-hmm. And as I started researching social work, I realized that I saw it as a professional track that had a lot of options. So I graduated from the University of Utah in 1994. Nice. And shortly after getting my clinical license, in the 90s, I recognized that there was a very legitimate need to serve the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. At that time, people would try to get into therapy, but didn't know if their therapist was going to try to change their sexual orientation or have some kind of moral judgment against them. And so I designed my practice Pride Counseling. Mm-hmm. I picked that name so that people could look at a phone book or an ad and know within an instant,
see it.
Hey, this is a practice that could help me out. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, I'm prior LD Mormon. Mm-hmm. Went on a mission for the church, got married in the church, dealing with my own kind of shame and troubles with my sexual orientation. At some point, I felt like I needed to leave my marriage and leave the church. And that was actually during my graduate school.
Oh, it was during graduate school.
It was during graduate school.
You say 94?
Yeah, don't do the math.
I'm not doing the math. I'm saying around that time. So you're going through your, gosh, everything's coming to fruition. You're exploring your sexual orientation, going through the college, and you're also trying to start a practice.
Yeah,
roughly within those few years.
Yeah. So the point of this whole story is throughout most of my adolescence and young adulthood, the story around being a gay man was built around shame, guilt. I'm immoral. I'm not suitable in the eyes of God. And so I had a very strong, concentrated effort to get away from my sexuality. I happened to serve my mission in the North and South Dakota mission field.
No kidding.
And spent a lot of time with the Lakota people at Pine Ridge and some of the other reservations in that area. And I really got turned on to their world perspective and their concept of spirituality, which was so different than anything that I was aware of. So when I was coming out, I remember talking to my therapist saying, one of my angst was I'm not going to be able to do this as a Mormon. But spirituality is so important to me.
Yes.
And I remember reflecting with my therapist, I wish I could find the kind of spirituality I found on the reservations because it was very rich.
Wow.
And so it's interesting, as I was transitioning through these places in my life, I actually came across a group of Native individuals, Ute and Shoshone, who very willingly kind of adopted me into their community. And I started learning about their spirituality, ceremonies, sweat lodge, sundance ceremonies. And what I realized, and very quickly what they shared with me, was this very different premise around how they viewed sexual orientation and gender identity.
Wow.
And it just kind of blew my mind. And so I began studying at that point, trying to understand the implications of how we have been acculturated to look at ourselves, especially in relationship to our sexuality, but then how queer people have been encouraged to see themselves as less than. And in many ways, we've lived up to that expectation.
Yeah.
Although we're kind of living in different times now. So all of that has informed not only my spiritual practices, but it has certainly informed how I work with people clinically.
Wow. That's quite the journey.
Yeah. There's more detail.
There's a lot more detail, I'm sure. That you really brought that down to a nutshell. But that is a lot to be taking into within just a few years, and then exploring that with the Lakota tribe. And wow. I want to get into what you were introduced to, especially because of how much queer individuals or queer identified folk have been taught that they are less than.
Yeah.
And I mean, tell me a little bit more about that. What's the kind of mind shift that you started to experience from being less than to what the Lakota, how they view sexual orientation and sexual expression?
Yeah. So just to kind of broaden this discussion. So for me, the introduction was through Native American people that I was spending time with.
Okay. So not just the Lakota.
Yeah. It started out in North and South Dakota.
Okay.
But a bulk of it was when I became engaged really in a very intimate way with people from the Shoshone and Ute tribes who have been friends of mine, who are also scholars in this area. And to broaden this conversation, when you look at most indigenous societies, so not just Native Americans, but like the indigenous people of Peru, I spent a lot of time in Peru. A lot of societies that are kind of from the earth, if you will. How would I say this? So in Native American culture, where most people are familiar with the medicine wheel. And the medicine wheel is a representation that basically says all life has value and purpose. Now, I'm not saying every tribe relates to the medicine wheel, but this concept that all people have value, that all things have value and purpose. And so if we look at some of the anthropological writings and what have you, what we're learning is that folks that identified what we would call lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, that they were often integrated in the communities. Mm-hmm. They weren't ostracized, they weren't kicked to the side, but in many ways they were seen as valuable and that they had purpose. Mm-hmm. So many tribes, for instance, would have traditions. So if you were my son and you were identifying as gay, mm-hmm. which is our construct, not theirs.
Yeah.
But if you were identifying in this way, there was ritual and ceremony in which you would proclaim your role in the tribe. Mm-hmm. And then the elders and the medicine people would teach you how to honor that path.
Wow.
And again, that's not just unique to Native American communities, mm-hmm. but if you look at indigenous philosophies with Australians, people from the Andes, people from the rainforest, right? That these were concepts that were original to the people. And as a therapist, I think about, our construct in our society mm-hmm. is based on morality, judgment, you're wrong, you're unworthy, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We fuel a narrative that says you should be ashamed and embarrassed.
Mm-hmm. We do.
In contrast to these primitive nations, mm-hmm. right, in sarcasm,
yes,
who said, no, you have place and purpose, and we're going to show you how to honor that. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty powerful shift. Like I was telling you earlier, one way I integrate that place of awareness is I will just ask people, why were you blessed in this way? What are the gifts that come from this perspective?
Why were you blessed this way?
Yeah, and people kind of like, what are you talking about?
Oh, yeah.
But when we start to change the narrative to consider, what does this give you? Mm-hmm. And
instead of what is your lack? How come you're taking away from society? Why aren't you quote unquote normal and falling into these categories? It's now changed to why were you blessed this way? What skills do you have? What is your purpose and your role in this community, in your life, and in general?
I tell clients all the time, normal is way overrated.
Oh, hardcore.
And it's kind of a pitiful ambition too, right? I just want to be normal. Really? Is that the best you can hope for?
Love it.
So I encourage clients, how would you like to be extraordinary? Ooh. Right? And how would you like to really step into the power of what you've been given mm-hmm. as opposed to retreating from it?
Yeah. And being really looking at it instead of being normal. That I like that. Being able to change it from normal is retreating from who you really are and that amazing, extraordinary part of you versus obtaining that or shooting for it. It's like, no, I just want to run backwards and look gray, if you will.
Yeah. And every tribe had a different kind of role. In many cases, folks that we identify as queer or LGBT mm-hmm. filled, in many cases, they were the medicine people, the shamans, the healers.
Wow.
In Africa, in a place called Bako Faso, the Dagara people, queer folks are seen as the keepers of the culture.
Wow.
Meaning their responsibility is to hold the integrity of the culture and traditions of the tribe. Mm-hmm. And that's the role that these queer folks hold. In fact, I talked to a shaman elder from this community who said, without our queer folks, we would not have what we have.
They wouldn't have their traditions.
They wouldn't have their traditions or their ceremonies or their, and the queer folks are seen as the gatekeepers.
Wow.
In some tribes, queer folks had responsibility in raising the children and caring for the children. Mm-hmm. It was variable, but the point is they had a place.
Mm-hmm. And a very important.
They were integral.
Yes, they were integral.
Yeah.
In the entirety of the community, of the tribe.
Right.
Which is a stark difference. As you're talking about this, it is such a mind shift to think that there's this, our traditions would not be what they are unless we had individuals that in our wording would be queer or LGBT. And all I can think of is growing up is like, oh gosh, I hope that we don't have, it's almost this thing to be feared.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope my son's not gay. Oh, I hope that this doesn't happen.
What would the neighbors think?
What would the neighbors think?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or we gotta kick you out of our churches, our synagogues, our temples. Right? You're not worthy to participate.
Very othered.
Yeah. And that has incredible impact. Now, research would suggest folks that navigate that come out of it with better resiliency skills, but we also know that people who can't navigate that run higher risk of depression and suicidality.
Definitely.
And so to me, therapeutically, and what we can do as our communities is find that place of purpose. And so how do we amplify that? How do we find that? I guess the new term in psychology is strength-based, right? So this is one way of reframing, what is the strength and the advantage of identifying as LGBT?
Yeah. Wow. So as we, and maybe we'll, as we're talking about this, we'll address this later on too. I can think of how this can be such a mind shift, even as we're talking about it, that we're trying to move it from this negative, and ultimately two parts, your queer sexuality and spirituality, and how does all that merge together versus having it together in one and recognizing, well, if my son or my partner or my neighbor is identifying as queer, how do we bring this back into our communities, or how could we possibly start using some of this to go, let's bring an integral part back into everyone has a role to play, and you don't have to be normal in order to have that role to be played. Right. What are some of your thoughts on that? On, I don't know, what we can do if you want to support your teen, or if just, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm hearing you say how we bring it back into Christianity, and I don't want to sound like I'm evil, but I don't know that it's ever been a part of the Christian dogma.
Mm-hmm. And maybe, you're right. If I'm talking Christian on that, you are 100% right that I don't think it has been. And I guess maybe I'm thinking back in society, but maybe it's never been a part of North American society besides in...
in fact, it was early Christianity when the Christian missionaries were coming through this nation, right? And they would come across native communities and they would see these folks. Some people may be familiar with the term Two-Spirit.
Yes.
Now, Two-Spirit is a contemporary concept. So the Lakota people would refer to someone like this as a Winkte. They were a Winkte, meaning they walked in between worlds, and each tribe had their own term. And the word Two-Spirit came around the early civil rights movement and the gay and lesbian movement in the late 60s, early 70s, as a group of Native people came together to say, how do we give this common tradition among our tribes a common term? And so Two-Spirit came about. And again, the word Two-Spirit was not about having two spirits, but it was a manifestation of the balance between the masculine and the feminine, and that these people worked between those worlds.
Wow. I don't think there's anything like that in the Bible or Christianity.
When the Europeans came through, they were calling these people Berdache, which actually has a very derogatory connotation to it.
Oh.
That the Berdache were some form of prostitution.
Oh.
But what happened is early Christians basically part of the persecution was to get rid of these two-spirited people because they garnered a lot of respect among the communities they were trying to colonize. And so the only way they could really get to them was to get rid of them.
Ooh. So
I like to make a distinction between religion and spirituality because I think spirituality, independent of how you identify religiously, is a relationship to yourself, to others, and whatever higher power you're in relationship with. And I can be an incredibly spiritual person and never step into a temple or a church, right? Yeah. And so I've been in lots of ceremonies with communities of two-spirited people. And people who are kind of mindful about their spirituality as queer identified individuals. And I've also been in lots of ceremonies where two-spirit people weren't involved. And there is a distinct difference about how that medicine works.
Really?
There's something that's very liberated about how that energy moves. And it's very hard to describe. But I think if we're going to be in the business of assisting people in finding that kind of access to spirituality, is we've got to give permission and purpose. We have to entertain the possibility that someone may be able to access their spirituality without the temple of religion.
Wow. And I'm glad that you're bringing that up, because spirituality really is has been claimed by religion. Saying well, the term, I'm sorry, the term spiritual, I'm a spiritual person, that tends to mean that I go to church, I go to temple, I do these things. And so being able to take it from that and recognize spirituality as something much grander than it's your relationship with higher power versus this is what I do on a weekly basis, or these are the hours that I spend throughout the week. But being close.
And a sense of connectedness. Like, I love to go hiking and just find a quiet place to sit and to be with nature, to be with myself, to be in a place of prayer and connection can be an incredibly powerful experience.
Yeah.
And I think anyone can access spirituality and develop that. But I think the challenge that most of our queer folks have is kind of the historical trauma from religion that says you don't belong. And so in my experience, most queer folks just want to retreat from the whole discussion, which is unfortunate, because I think we come from a lineage of spirituality and a connection to that power that as a queer community, we need to come back and discover. And in the way that I do that, like, I do a lot of ceremonies, I hold a lot of community events. A lot of queer folks come to these events, and I
think there was even you had a web page. I was researching some of this, and I actually came across a video of you on YouTube.
With long hair?
No, you did not. You did not have long hair at the time. But I want to say it's something as simple as queerspirituality.com or
queerspirit.org.
Queerspirit.org. That's what it was. But you had a beautiful chant that was going on. There was a prayer, a pipe prayer, and
I thought we got rid of that.
No. It's got 512 views.
So Queer Spirit was an attempt, and we did this for several years, and we actually it's not active as a group anymore, although I've thought about resurrecting it, because the place that we were doing our retreats, they lost their property. And it was in the cedar forest in the middle of Spring City, Utah. You could retreat and be in the middle of nowhere, and we would have talking circles and just kind of deconstructing the stories of how we learned to be queer, and then examined how would we like to reconstruct that story.
Wow.
And we would do sweat lodge ceremonies, pipe ceremonies, yoga and meditation, and the idea was to connect to our source and to spend a long weekend kind of unfolding those stories. And so you probably found Queer Spirit still exists as a website just because we don't know how to get rid of it. But
when I clicked on it, it was like, this no longer exists. So
okay.
I was like,
but we had interesting writings on there and some videos. But it was really powerful. You know, a lot of people have been damaged by religion and carry a lot of anger towards how religion has impacted the narratives with their families. People feel very isolated and separated from their religious source. And so what Queer Spirits thought our idea was, how do we help people get connected to a sense of spirituality that they can own and define for themselves?
Yeah.
And even as a therapist, because I talk about spirituality with most of my clients, and I'll ask people, what is your connection to finding peace? How do you do that? And a lot of people will respond in this really negative way about religion, but as we start exploring ways that they find that peace, it's usually a very individualized approach.
So it tends to start off with what it's not, kind of in the negative. It's not this, it's not that.
Yeah.
But as soon as they start
I don't go to church. Hell no.
I think it's been my number one response from people too, or my response is, when I say, I think I've even moved to, hey, when I say spirituality, what does that mean to you versus are you a spiritual, tell me about your relationship with spirit, because negative connotation, or they assume I'm talking about where do you go to church on Sunday? So being able to bring that part, that was a part of this goal, was to be able to have someone get in connection with peace with spirit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think, having worked with a lot of therapists in training and what have you, I think a lot of people have this anxiety about if this person's going to get angry about the question about spirituality or religion. And I think as a therapist, right, I need to be prepared that my client is not going to necessarily feel the same way I might about my own religion, right? This isn't to be disparaging towards religion, but it's to recognize that religion has not been kind to sexual minorities or those who identify on the spectrum around their gender.
Yeah.
And therapeutically, or even ecclesiastically, I think people need to be, can I sit and hear your pain in relationship to that? And then can I help you explore possibilities?
Some other options.
Yeah. And I think the one way to get to the possibilities is, what is the gift your identity brings to the world? What is it about being queer or transgender or lesbian? Like, what does that bring to the broader narrative? Have you considered what the gift is?
Which it sounds to me like that would be one of those questions that could take someone back a little bit from the anger. It shifts it from I'm being hurt, and obviously that needs to be validated and explored. However, it sounds to me like that can create an out for, I'm in this cycle of anger, and there's nothing I can do about it because this is not accepted in my current viewpoint. But if we can shift that to what is the gift? That means that's a process.
Yeah. I think it's a good question everyone should ask themselves.
I agree.
But I think in particular when dealing with those who have been traumatized by religion around their sexuality or gender expression, it's an interesting question to ask. But as the facilitator, I need to know my own relationship with myself, but I need to be prepared to sit in the place with my client in a way that doesn't promote judgment or doubt about where the client's coming from.
Yeah. And as a trained therapist, it's great to be aware of that. If you're a mom or a parent or a friend, this may be a little bit more difficult to get in a non-judgmental space. But I do think it is something that's the goal that you should be approaching this by.
Yeah. I think with parents and grandparents, being both now in my life, is you hold on to these expectations and hopes for your children and grandchildren. And a lot of those hopes are built around the narrative that works best for us as individuals. Right? Of course I want you to get married in the temple and have 14 kids and do it this way because that's what was beautiful for me. And so there's that disappointment, and I would even suggest a place of grief and loss for loved ones.
Yeah.
Who it's like, wow, the story I had hoped for you may not work. And can I liberate my expectations to celebrate the uniqueness of your own journey? And as a parent that has fully supported 110% everything my daughter has ever decided to do.
Which
not. Right?
Not.
Right? That is a huge piece of work. And And it takes incredible introspection. I think it takes incredible faith to really, can I fully trust my spiritual source in a way to know that my child's going to be okay on this journey, and that my job is to love and support and encourage whatever uniqueness their path brings.
So it takes it from a story and an expectation to values. I value my child. I value their happiness. How can I best support them, even if I really am not super sure of what's going on in
What's
the
the
future?
greatest commandment again?
Oh, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Something
along those
it's
lines.
around love, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Love God, love thyself, love thy neighbor.
Not complete and total compliance to my expectations.
Yes, 100%. So do you feel like, as you've worked with individuals who are exploring, or you ask this question, what's the gift that you have or that you're bringing to the table here? Does there seem to be a process? I don't want to break it down into like stages, if you will, but what kind of a process do you see individuals going through as they go on this new journey?
That's a question that you could respond to generationally, but I think just in really broad overtones, like I may ask that question, most people cannot answer it in the first session. It's such a stark contrast to what they've been feeling. And, you're asking someone to change direction on how they've been socialized to see themselves. So that's like learning a new language. When you get off the plane, you may have had a few lessons, but it's going to take you a few weeks to get more fluent, right? Same thing around self-esteem and shifting our personal paradigms, right? It's going to take time and practice. And so it's interesting how many clients come back the second session and say, wow, I really gave that a lot of thought. And it really got me thinking. And so there's kind of this maybe initial denial and resistance to a new idea like this. And then there's maybe kind of an exploration process, like, let's play with this a little bit.
Gotcha.
And then there's this place of, well, how do I incorporate it in the face of opposition? And so people who have parental support, community support, friends and peers who can be supportive. And when I say supportive, meaning I can have a conversation with you, I can talk to you about my struggles without feeling like you're judging me or pathologizing me or evaluating my worthiness. If those things are in place, then I find that client can start to shift and adapt into some healthier choices and outcomes.
That makes sense.
If they're facing resistance, I don't have a place at church, I don't have a place in my own family, mom's still crying herself asleep every night, right? If those kind of things are happening, then I find that the client has a difficult time adapting to the new paradigm or adapting to a paradigm that works best for them.
Yeah.
And so, and I think if you look at the work of Caitlin Ryan with the Family Acceptance Project, she's done a lot of research on accepting and non-accepting behaviors that has a lot of validation to it. And the accepting behavior list that she has, I think is a helpful guide for parents, ecclesiastical leaders, therapists, to know how to support the client in that work.
And as you're saying that, the acceptance behaviors, what I really like about what you're saying there is some people are so worried that we use the word accepting, that all of a sudden that means that you, and we could fill in the blank. Accepting could mean that you have to march in the Pride Parade next June. And they're not like, I can't be that accepting. I don't even know what this is for me. But everything that I heard you just saying, that you can sit across from them, you can sit across from somebody, listen to them, and really hold back your judgments and just be there in a loving space, that is a behavior that you can, while you're going through your own process, you can also give that behavior and give a very accepting experience to this person who's talking to you versus feeling like you have to be all or nothing.
Yeah. I don't even think accepting behavior would suggest that you have to even agree. I spend a lot of time with people that I do not agree with.
Fair.
But I can listen, I can be attentive, I can be caring, I can even love these people. But I'm also going to be mindful to not be offensive or derogatory to something that somebody else holds as sacred.
Yeah.
Right? And so if my child is on this unique path, right, that may not be what I anticipated, I don't even think parents have to be in agreement with it morally. But can I still demonstrate virtues that would say, I love you, that I am trying to understand you and exercise a level of empathy that says the value of our relationship is more important than the disagreement around morality or religious tenets.
Yeah. I completely agree with you on that. Wow. The way that you're talking about being a therapist where you can sit, maybe not even, I'm thinking of being a therapist in that way, where you can sit across from someone, listen to someone say, this is what I think, this is what I believe. And you can go, yeah, I don't agree with that, but you can still be caring and loving and be there for that person and what they need. That would make finding a therapist very interesting if you had to find the exact beliefs, exact understandings. You're like, okay, we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that.
But there are people who shop for therapists with that criteria.
That is true.
Yeah. But we're kind of, it's, I have this bumper sticker on the back of my trailer that says celebrate diversity. And I really think the strength of our identity as a country is ultimately found in the diversity of how it's reflected, from religious diversity, racial diversity, the myriad of ways that we show up in this country. I mean, we're a country of immigrants. Unless you're Native American, you are not original, right? But it's so interesting in the celebration of our diversity. What keeps us from being able to sit down and celebrate the differences? To really appreciate, wow, we see the world very differently, and yet we share it. And, how do we do that collaboratively? How can we do that collaboratively? And especially in this dynamic that often tears family. I'm working with a client who, the thing that brought him into therapy is, I think I have to divorce myself from my family.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
Right? When you think about that, here's somebody who loves his family, and yet his interaction with his family has become so toxic because he identifies in a particular way. It's, what happened to us as a civilization that we get so rigid that there is but one way to do things?
And you need to follow it, or else ostracization, like you get pushed off.
And so, I think part of this conversation is this encouragement. Instead of saying, okay, what's wrong with you? What happens when I say, what is it about me that I could adapt that would help deepen this relationship despite our differences?
Really reflecting on yourself versus if Johnny over here would just do blank, things would be easier.
Yeah.
Ask that question of yourself. What can I do to make this relationship easier, more connecting, deeper?
Right.
As you said. Wow. So I really love that aspect of, we don't have to agree. We can be all parts of what our beliefs are, but still show a lot of love. If someone is looking to explore, say someone's listening to this podcast right now and going, yes, I agree with all this, or I find myself in this place where I don't feel accepted anywhere, even within myself, and they're wanting to develop. I'm going back to those words of developing spirituality versus really exploring their own.
Discovering
their own, where they are in spirituality and what where their purpose and place is. What are some recommendations you have for them if they're wanting to explore this more?
Are you asking in terms of who they can reach out to, or
Yeah, I
what
guess
can they do?
Both. And that's a great clarification, because if someone's wanting to get more into the spiritual side of things that are with sweat lodges and things like that, yes, who can they reach out to? But then also, maybe on just an individual level, we've asked this question. Are there other questions to be asked? I mean, I'm sure there's a myriad of them, but...
Yeah. Here would be my first suggestion. If I were like in the middle of nowhere and there was a lack of resources and I was listening to this podcast and I'm like, great, this is great. Now, how do I tap into it? I think what happens, whether you're a parent or somebody aware of somebody that's struggling, or maybe you're that person that's in the struggle, that sometimes we get consumed in the immediate struggle. And that can be very distracting. And sometimes I think, I'll give you an example. I had a client call me on a weekend. Well, it wasn't really a client. It's kind of a friend, but somebody that I was kind of helping through a process. And I wanted to go hiking, but he really needed somebody to talk to. And I said, look, come with me. We're going to do a coaching session up in the mountains. And so we went hiking, and I sat him down. And I said, now I'm going to go do my meditation. I just want you to sit here and just really breathe and take in, right? And what happened by taking him out of his environment, by putting him in the place of nature, and just inviting him to breathe, by the time I went back to him, he had perspective. Wow. Right? And like in the natural world, when was the last time you saw a tree that was neurotic? When was the last time you saw a stream struggling to get down its path? Right? Maybe the most neurotic thing I've seen in nature is a chipmunk.
Yeah.
But they're very deliberate. They know what they're doing. Right? Nature is full of examples. Right? If we can step outside of everybody else's construct and just find our own quiet, authentic place. If we look at the examples in nature around us, we can tap into our own voice.
Wow.
And with this guy, he's part of a spiritual community that I participate in. And so we, in native ways, like smoke a pipe, meaning with tobacco, you offer prayer and you do it quietly. And it's a very contemplative process. And so when I go hiking, I take my pipe and I sit, and that's where I do my meditations. And so I just had him smoke that pipe, and it was interesting. We didn't really talk a lot, other than getting out of the environment helped to calm him to the place of finding perspective. And he was able to bring that home with him. Wow. Now, we had other conversations, but for him, it became a practice to go up in the mountains and to spend some quiet time by the river. And to really sort things out without all the chatter of everyone else around him.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'd say that's one of my favorite places to be, too. I think of being out Ashley National Forest, which is far east in Utah, over Vernal area. And when I think of my source, if you will, the source of peace, connection, I think of being in the trees that are, maybe 2-3 feet away from each other, and then being right by a stream that where no one can get a hold of you, and it is just all you can do is hear nature. That's all you can do is hear it and just be with yourself. Yeah. That is an experience that, wherever you're at, if that's the beach, if that's whatever, but if you can be with it, that is very powerful.
Yeah. All the stuff in our lives are distractions.
Yeah.
That we've created a story of necessity around. Our cell phones are a good example.
Oh, yes.
There used to be a time where phones were connected to cords.
And the wall.
And people existed without our text and our messages. Things could wait.
Something to think about there.
So, yeah, I mean, so I'm talking to that kid that may be out there that may be feeling like they're alone. I think on the other hand, the internet can be a great resource of finding communities of like-minded people. even resources of people to talk to. And I think the other piece of it, I think consumers of therapists are just that. And if a therapist is not delivering, if their therapeutic approach is producing more anxiety, guilt, and shame than when you walked into the room, there's no reason to keep paying them.
100%.
And I think a lot of people give up personal authority to their therapist.
Yeah.
It's like
I agree with you.
You know, a good therapist should not play into that. But I think a good consumer can say, yeah, this isn't working. And I need to find a therapist that's competent.
Yeah. I frequently tell my clients, like, hey, if this isn't, you know, let's do, I don't use it in the term dating, because that would also incline some different things. But it's like, this is a trial period. If you're going to, you know, let's find out if this is working for you. If not, find other therapists. If we work for a while, you know, you have the utmost control of that. Find the community, the people that are going to support you. There's no need to stay in relationships with anyone, anything, any organization that is not being supportive of what your ultimate goal, or I mean, I want to use the word goal. I'd say goal falls right back into this construct that we have, but your blessing here on this earth.
Yeah. Therapists should be provoking you to find your own solutions, not replicating their own.
Yes. I'm telling you what to do.
Yeah.
And ultimately, then it comes back to them.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, then whose problem is it? It's still yours, not theirs. So that's great. I appreciate you saying that. That's being able to find and take time away from what life is bringing. And if we are able to, I know we're getting close to the end of our time today, but I think from what we've talked about, that pretty much covers a lot of what I was hoping to cover with how parents or loved ones can help someone, and if someone themselves is going through this big change, what they'd like to do to be able to seek their blessing on the community or on this earth. Those are some of the things I really wanted to cover today. I'm curious if there's anything off the top of your head that you're really wanting to retouch on, or feel that we need to cover.
Well, I just think kind of the big takeaway here is people's reaction. Like if I find out my kid's gay or lesbian or identifying as transgender, if people could just take a moment to not react and take time to process and really think about ultimately, what do I want for my child? And to recognize that words and reactions have consequences. And then I think the other piece that I'm always wanting to reinforce is, again, I see a lot of queer folks who are angry at God, angry at religion, because of how they have been treated. And that anger is legitimate, but I really want to challenge people to kind of rise above that and to find how spirit resonates with them.
Yeah.
And to be willing to celebrate their own unique relationships with those things. And to recognize that maybe God's plan for us is unique. And you said, how do you get back to that? And I think getting back to it is about a willingness to discover something that hasn't been prescribed, but something that's organic to who we are.
Something that's organic to who we are, to who you are.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that sounds great. It's a process, though. I think we're very much in a community or in a society that thinks that we can get things fairly well. Amazon gets it to us pretty much overnight or in 2 days, right?
Well, I sometimes tell clients who get stuck, I said, look, what if I told you the difference from where you are to where you want to be is the difference of a thought, right? Thoughts are addictive. and we treat them as if they're concrete. And then we create the expectation that it has to be a long and difficult process. It's only as difficult as we desire it to be. And I know it sounds like an oversimplification, but when you think about it,
I was like, tell me more about it.
if all I have to do is shift my perspective, I liberate a lot of psychological space that wasn't there before.
I'm getting you now, because I think I'm stuck in one of my concrete thoughts. From like, what do you mean? It would be overnight. But I get what you're saying, because if we do switch or make that switch.
Well, when I first started my journey as a therapist, all therapy was long term. This will take you a year to get over, right? And insurance companies did nothing but throw sessions at people. Now what do insurance companies do?
They give you 6.
You get 6 to 8 sessions. And you know what I have found? By shifting my paradigm, that I find a lot of clients do okay with 4 to 5 sessions, depending on where they're at and their capacity to liberate that space.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just one
great.
example, but I think we get very committed
To what things should look like.
Yeah. And the other piece of it is we use fear as the leverage point. Well, fear seems to be the thing that we're most afraid of. I find, well, what are you afraid of? That you'll get what you want?
Which in of itself can be really scary for some reason.
Why? Or does fear just become our scapegoat? It worked politically, right?
Yeah.
So I think psychologically we create an overdependence on fear.
Totally.
But when you ask clients to really break down what the fear is about, very few clients are able to really fully articulate line by line what they think the dire consequences will be. It's just easier to say, I'm afraid.
Like, oh, I'm afraid of that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, I can see why you're afraid of that. Gosh, tell me more.
If you could step through that fear and get to the other side, then what would it look like? Right?
Yeah.
So I'm challenging that our approach to getting what we want is really already there. We just have to grasp it.
We have to grasp it. Make that shift. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jerry. I really appreciate you being on the show today, especially telling us all about your experiences as well as encouraging us to make these mind shifts.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll see everybody on the next episode. Thank you so much, Hive Mates, for tuning in. We look forward to giving you more episodes like this. If you do have any questions, please give us a call at 385-449-1818. You can also send a text message to that to follow up. I'd love to hear what journey you're on and what thoughts, feelings, experiences came up for you as you're listening to this episode. But like always, keep the hive alive. And or keep the buzz going. That's the keep the hive alive.
It works.
It works. As long as it rhymes, no one cares, right? But keep the buzz alive and share this with your friends. We're all in this together. We're all moving and growing together. But we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks. This has been another episode of the Birds and Bees podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions about the show, comments, or questions you would like addressed in another episode, please give us a call at 385-449-1818. Leave your voicemail and your question, or you can also email us at birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com or visit us online at birdsandbeespodcast.com.